So we concluded last time that the only time when a family needs to be checked when a couple come for marriage is if there are two witnesses who have testified of a rumor of there being some invalidation in the family. But generally speaking, if there is no reason to assume that there is something to invalidate either the male or the female coming to get married, there's no need to do any checks in terms of yichus, in terms of lineage of the family. Having said that, there is another Gemara in Ketubot which discusses what happens if a person is accused, an allegation is made against that person of being invalid, whether it's an allegation that he is a mamzer, or an allegation that he's a halal, which is not allowed to marry into a Kohen family, or an allegation the person is not Jewish. Any kind of allegation made against a person's yichus, against a person's lineage, and they are quiet and they just don't say anything and they don't answer back. What is the status in such a case? Maybe can we say that from the fact that the person has kept quiet, that shows it's a kind of admission to that allegation, and in such a case, that creates a status of doubt about that person's family and they need to be checked before marriage. So in the Gemara, there are three opinions about this, but the prevailing opinion, which all the Rishonim follow, is the opinion of the Tanakama, which is that if someone calls you any kind of pesul, any kind of invalidation, and you keep quiet, then we have to take on that perhaps, we have to be concerned that perhaps the fact he or she was silent when they were tarnished and an allegation was made against them shows that they admit to it, and therefore their family would need to be checked before marriage. This is what the Gemara concludes, and this is what the Rishonim are rule, and this is codified in the Shulchan Aruch. The problem with all of this is that there is a tension with another famous Gemara, which tells us that if a person is silent during an argument, then that's actually a good sign, because a person who keeps quiet when people say bad things to him, shomea herpato ve'eno meshiv, a person who hears what people say bad about him and keeps quiet, that's something to be commended. It's something positive. It's something which is praised in the Gemara. So how do we reconcile this? And also, what's the practical applications of all of this today? Does this still apply? If someone calls you a mamzer, someone calls you, yeah, your mother wasn't Jewish, she wasn't really Jewish, etc., and you keep quiet, does that really mean that now we have to assume and perhaps that there is some kind of taint in the person's family? So what's the practical application in all of this? So as I said, the Rishonim and the Shulchan Aruch bring down this main idea in the Gemara. However, this halakha is limited in many different ways. In 5 different ways it's limited in the Rishonim, and therefore practically it's quite rare for this to be applicable. As I said, there are 5 limitations to this. So firstly, the Rambam writes, yes, we need to be concerned if a person keeps quiet. The Gemara says that you're meant to keep quiet at a time of argument. That's not when it concerns psul yichus. No, that's not when it concerns an attack against your lineage. An attack against your lineage, you need to stand up and you need to object, because lineage is something very important. But having said that, even in a case where a person kept quiet when he was tainted and alleged against, even in such a case, if you do a check and you investigate the family, it's an extensive check going back about 4 generations. Even in such a case, if you do the check 4 generations back, then it would be fine. Okay, so that's already point number 1, that even in a case where a person kept quiet when he was invalidated, when somebody made an allegation of invalidation, if you do the checks going back a few generations and everything's fine, then of course that will be good. The Ra'avad, Rabbi Avraham ben David from Provence, says something very interesting. He says, this whole idea in the Gemara that the fact you kept quiet shows that you admit to it, was only in those days when Bedin would take seriously any kind of allegations made. And the fact that you kept quiet and you didn't object to it shows that you admit to it, because you have the power in your hands to take this person to Bedin for making such a serious allegation and accusation against you. And the fact you didn't shows a kind of admission. But he says nowadays, and he's talking 900, 800 years ago, nowadays when the Bedin don't really get involved in these kinds of accusations, the fact you kept quiet, on the contrary, is actually a good sign, as the Gemara says, that when you keep quiet to an accusation, that's good. So yes, in those days when you were accused of being invalid and you kept quiet, that's a sign that there's some invalidation in your family. But nowadays, that doesn't apply anymore. And on the contrary, it's actually a good sign if you keep quiet. Having said that, he does say that this only applies bishat meriva, only during an argument where you were accused and you kept quiet, then that's no sign. But if just randomly a person said to you, you know something, I know your mother's not Jewish, I know you're a mamzer, I know you're invalid, and you kept quiet, that's not in the context of an argument. And in such a case, you would need to stand up and you would need to object to being called this. Okay, tomorrow we'll see some more limitations to this din.